a figure whose name and legacy is burned into the minds of billions, coming from a tenacious Greek Macedonian family. She had to fight and even kill for her place on the throne, a noble attempt to save a failing Egypt.
Cleopatra was willing to do anything to retain Egypt.
She bore children from two of ancient Rome's most powerful men. She was a writer, an inventor, a scholar.
Thousands of years later, we're still talking either about the men in her life or what she looked like rather than her accomplishments.
She left her mark during the final days of ancient Egypt. The seventh queen in her family to be named Cleopatra.
Let us see if Cleopatra was black or not.
Her story has been warped so much throughout history, from biased opinions to praise. Yet, who was she really?
The heir to the throne had to be of pure Macedonian Greek blood.
Keep her dignity protected.
Everyone thinks they know her. Everyone has a different opinion, but most of those are modern, based on films and misinformed playwrights.
This is the reason why I've been searching for Cleopatra's tomb. I believe she deserved to be found.
How much do we really know about the true Cleopatra?
Hello to everybody and welcome to our program. I'm Chiara Cavalieri, president of Italian-Egyptian Association Eridanus, and today we are honored to have with us one of the most renowned archaeologists in the world, Dr. Zahi Hawass, and a filmmaker known for his unique vision, visual style, and powerful storytelling. Curtis Ryan Woodside. Hello, Curtis.
Hi, Chiara.
With over 50 years of experience in the industry, Curtis has directed and produced a wide variety of films, including documentaries, short film, music videos, and commercial. Cleopatra had a real story, the documentary that's defying the Netflix narrative. When filmmaker Curtis Ryan Woodside and the Egyptologist Sophia Aziz were tapped to work on the Netflix production of Queen Cleopatra, they dropped out almost immediately. Tell us, Curtis, of the idea of this documentary.
So, basically, when the trailer came out for this other documentary, if we will call it that, I had already been planning to make this Cleopatra documentary that I did, but it was only meant to be released next year. I'd shot a lot of the things already. Sophia and I had already been speaking about it. The trailer for this other documentary came out, and as soon as I saw it, I got on my phone. I sent a message to Dr. Hawass. I said, we need to do something to tell the correct story. Sophia and I started planning, and we put that documentary together in 2 weeks. So it was a lot of hard work. Yeah.
And which personal ideas do you have about the historical Cleopatras?
The historical Cleopatra, I think she's a very interesting woman. I think there's a lot we still don't know about her, but there's already a lot that we do know. And when I was doing the planning for this documentary, what I planned to do was to look at all the different sources and put them together and basically come up with the middle ground of who Cleopatra was, because you can't always take what the Romans say. You can't always take what the Greeks say. You can't always take what the Egyptians say. So when you compare all of them, you get a better understanding of who Cleopatra was. The Romans were threatened because she was a powerful woman. The Romans didn't like women. The Egyptians celebrated her because she was a woman, but she still had to dress on occasion in male attire, much like Hatshepsut and other female pharaohs. So I think she's very, very interesting. We can't really say what we think of her personality or anything like that, but historically wise, what we know that she did a very good job, and she tried her best to bring Egypt back up.
And which historical sources did you utilize for getting information about that period?
So Sophia and we spent quite a lot of time doing research. What we looked at actual ancient Egyptian texts, so mostly from stela and papyri, and also from Dendera Temple and other places where Cleopatra is mentioned. Not just that, we also looked at the Greek philosophers who wrote about Cleopatra 100 years, 200, 300 years after. So we looked at what Herodotus would have written. We looked at what Plutarch wrote. We looked at what the Roman scholars wrote about her. And it's very interesting because some of them, they talk about Cleopatra 300 years after Cleopatra had died. It's like writing about, I don't know, King George. We don't exactly know, but we have to trust what people write. So if we write a book about King George today, we have to rely on what they said long ago. Same with Cleopatra. But how much can you really believe of that? But with Cleopatra, the thing we wanted to really investigate was her family line. So we spent a lot of time comparing the different stories we have of her family line. And actually, at the end of the day, they are very much clear.
Thank you very much, Curtis. And do you think that Netflix has manipulated history for ideological purposes, and why?
Oh, yes. They have definitely. We have seen this, when they make a fictional story, like they did the series about Troy, and they changed Achilles to a black character. It wasn't seen as so much of a big issue. They changed Anne Boleyn from a white British queen into a black woman. People were upset, but they didn't care because it wasn't being labeled as fact. It wasn't being labeled as a documentary. Then when they did this Cleopatra thing, they labeled it as a documentary, and they portrayed Cleopatra with features that don't match what we know about Cleopatra. There's even one Roman source that writes, he wrote a whole paragraph about Cleopatra's breasts, and he explains how they were so white it looked like the moon, and blah, 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 blah. So we have that as a reference to kind of skin color. But for me, it's not about skin color, because if you take someone from, let's say, Ethiopia, and you put them next to someone from Nigeria, we qualify these people as black, but they look completely different. So for me, it's not about skin color. It's about anthropological and ethnic makeup, and that's just a fact that we can't ignore. They have changed Cleopatra with a certain idea in mind, and it's an idea that I see keeps coming up. this rewriting of history. I will use, let's say, The Little Mermaid. Now, The Little Mermaid, they changed her to a black actress. I don't really care. I've never even seen the original Little Mermaid. For me, it's not really an issue, but there is an underlying issue in that they are trying to rewrite history. We see now Aragorn from Lord of the Rings has been made from a Nordic character. Now he is a black man. It's a lot of changes in the fantasy world, also in the factual world, where they're trying to change characters. And I feel it's not good to change history in that way. Why do we have to change something we already know? Let's learn from history, but then let's tell stories of actual Black Africans. Like, we have Black African queens. This Cleopatra documentary that this other streaming service released, it's not only an insult to the Egyptian people, to the people of Greece, but it's also an insult to the actual Black African queens that they could have highlighted, because there are stories. That I think is the biggest thing. And I feel sad that they became entangled in this movement to rewrite history. I feel very sad for them.
And what are the main events of Cleopatra's reign, and how can we contextualize them in the political landscape of the time?
How can we contextualize Cleopatra's? Well, at the time, there was a lot of mixing happening in Egypt. There had been the Assyrian invasion. There had been the Persian invasion. There was a big Jewish community then living in Egypt as well. And then we have the Greeks that have been living there for a very, very long time. So to say that the ancient Egyptians were not racist is actually laughable, because racism is described as a certain group of people seeing themselves as superior to others. And the ancient Egyptians showed themselves above all of their enemies in a way that can be seen as racist. But that is just the time that we're living in there when we talk about Cleopatra's time. So we see the pharaohs smiting the enemies, and the enemies are the Libyans, the Assyrians, the people from the south in Nubia, and the Egyptians showed themselves completely separate. So at the time of Cleopatra, they also wanted to keep their family line completely pure Greek. So to have concubines and to mix is not allowed. That's why they had so much inbreeding. And with the case of Cleopatra's mother, the evidence suggests that she is either Cleopatra V, who died the same year that Cleopatra was born. That is too coincidental. Or it is a Persian woman that also makes sense, because Cleopatra, when she was chased out of Egypt, she went to Persia. So there's a lot of things that make more sense than a story. The story about Cleopatra's mother being an Egyptian black concubine comes from the 1980s. And this is from, I believe it is a German historian who created this story out of his mind. There's actually no ancient record of this at all.
Thank you. And what was Cleopatra's role in the Roman Empire, and how did her relationship with the Romans influence the history of Egypt?
Well, the Romans didn't like Cleopatra. They hated her. And if Cleopatra had been a bastard child, they would have written this. They would have been screaming this from the rooftops. They didn't like Cleopatra when she arrived in Egypt, when she arrived in Rome. and she was presented as the consort of Caesar. He built this temple dedicated to Venus and had a statue of Cleopatra placed in this temple. And we know that she was then referred to as the Egyptian whore, which I think is such a joke, because at that time, Caesar was her first boyfriend, and she only had 2 boyfriends in her entire lifetime. That doesn't make you a whore. They didn't like her. So they saw Egypt as the source of wealth, and they wanted to acquire Egypt. So they did so much to try and get Egypt. She did her best to keep Egypt. Her father did his best to keep Egypt. And unfortunately, it just didn't work for that long. But the biggest thing why they saw Cleopatra as a threat was because she was a woman.
Yes, in fact, the Latin poet Horace calls her Fatale Monstrum, but he have a great respect for Cleopatra because she decided to die like a queen, and not like a slave.
She died with dignity, and that's very important.
Yes. And what are the most significant aspects of art and architecture during Cleopatra's reign?
Most significant of art and architecture, I would say, would be Dendera Temple. It was first started by her father, which he never managed to finish. She added so much to that temple. She wanted to make sure that the zodiac signs were on the ceiling, because she loved studying astronomy. There's so much mystery at that temple. You know, the Egyptians had developed the calendar that we use today, and she introduced this calendar to Julius Caesar, which we would say is the Julian calendar, which actually comes from Egypt, and it is documented at Dendera Temple before Julius Caesar had come up with his calendar. That's quite significant, I think, is that. Yeah.
And which are the historical and archaeological evidences for the life of Cleopatra and her death?
Sorry, the line broke up a bit there.
Which are the historical and archaeological evidences for the life of Cleopatra and her death?
You know, with her life, we know very little about her as a person. With her death, it is also so debated. I don't believe that the story that we keep hearing, that she killed herself with this snake to connect herself to the goddess Isis, and it was this divine death. She knew that for the Greeks, as she was Greek, it was an honorable thing to do, to commit suicide. But in ancient Egypt, it was a different thing, because to take a snake and let the snake kill you, or to kill yourself, is usually a sentence that was given to convicted criminals. So it wasn't a noble way to die in Egypt. So I don't think she had this snake bite her breast or bite her arm, as we've heard. Cleopatra's physician gives us probably the clearest example of how she died, saying that there was a little cut mark on her arm, and it's possible that she just poured poison over that, and she experimented a lot with poison. So her life and her death overlap, because what she did in her life ultimately affected how she died.
And in what ways did Cleopatra seek to preserve the Egyptian heritage and stimulate cultural production during her reign?
Yeah, well, she did a lot, because actually at at Cleopatra's time, there was a drought, there was a problem with food, there were so many economic problems, and she wanted to fix this. And when she was co-ruling with her first brother, the first co-rulership that she had, one of the bulls had died down towards Thebes, and she went to the temple and escorted personally this bull to be presented to the temple. From there, they erected a stela commemorating this. They also showed Cleopatra at Fayum, at a temple that her father had built. And on this stela, Cleopatra is shown giving offerings to Isis, and Cleopatra is dressed in a male pharaoh attire. And this is something that would have definitely upset Cleopatra's 10-year-old brother and his advisors, because he was a little puppet. He was not really ruling, it was the advisors. She was chased out of Egypt. She came back, killed the brother, and became, the pharaoh that we know today. She really, from that action, she was already making moves to show to the people of Egypt she wants to restore the country. She practiced the religion of ancient Egypt. She learned the language of the ancient Egyptians. And at Dendera Temple, which is the best known remaining piece from Cleopatra's legacy, every image that we see of Isis or Hathor on the walls is probably Cleopatra herself, because that was when she said that she and Isis and Hathor were one and the same person. So for a Greek woman to have come into Egypt, accepted all of the Egyptian culture and religion, it shows you how strong the ancient Egyptian religion and culture was.
Yes.
Yeah.
And which was your main feeling in order to spend time and so many efforts to realize an historical movie on Cleopatra?
I didn't care much about Cleopatra, to be honest. I had this image in my mind of Cleopatra, and it's this Hollywood image from the movies. I didn't care much for Elizabeth Taylor acting as Cleopatra. I didn't even finish watching that movie because I just couldn't. It was so bad. So I had this image of Cleopatra in my head. And then something sparked in me when I saw the other streaming services trailer for their Cleopatra documentary, drama, whatever you want to call it. It's not a movie, it's not a series, it's a documentary. When I saw that, I not only felt angry that they were trying to change something that is so well documented in history, but that they were trying to change history, and it had upset within 1 hour. It had upset the entire country of Egypt. And the people in Egypt, when I do my documentaries, those are the people I think of first. I couldn't care less what someone in America, in the United Kingdom, in Australia, in Italy, and anywhere thinks about what I'm making. I'm happy if they enjoy watching it, but I'm telling the history, and that history needs to honor the Egyptian people. And I think that's the most important. The same as if I don't know much about Roman history. If I was to make a documentary on Roman history, I would want to make sure that this is a documentary that the Italian people could be proud of. So for me, it was a very big deal to do this, to actually make this 90-minute documentary telling the real story of Cleopatra.
And do you think that the politically correct in general means a serious threat to the freedom of thinking?
Yes. If we have to think if we have to think so carefully about what we say, if we have to think so carefully that we don't offend somebody, that is not right. Because there is a difference between fact and fiction. I'm a realist, I like to say fact. And that might offend some people. But hey, we've all had offensive things said to us. This whole politically correct thing, as long as you are not actively going out there to hurt people, I don't think it's a problem telling the truth. And when we're talking about history, how else are we meant to tell history other than, well, there it is. It's written on the walls. It's written on the papyrus. What else are we meant to do when we speak about history?
La regia potrebbe mandare la foto dei documentari di Curtis, your documentaries. The pic of your documentaries. Next, okay. Stop here. And two of your documentaries have been selected for the Festival of Cinema in Cefalù in Sicily for this September, Curtis.
Yes, that is correct. Last year, I had 3 documentaries selected for the Cefalù Film Festival, which were all ancient Egyptian documentaries. And this year, I'm very excited to have The Daughters of Tutankhamun and The Wonders of Fayum be part of this festival. Yeah, I'm very excited.
I think I want to come in Cefalù.
Oh yes,
see these those documentaries.
If you're gonna go, I'll go.
Okay. Yes. We have questions of Fabio Desideri. Where and when the documentary can be seen? Documentary of Cleopatra.
Yes, so Cleopatra, you can watch the documentary. I see you've put the link there. You can watch it on my YouTube channel, Curtis Ryan Woodside. If you are in America or the United Kingdom, you can watch it on Amazon Prime or other streaming services. That will be ad-free, but for now, it is completely free on YouTube.
Well, and you also worked with some of biggest names in the entertainment industry, as Celine Dion.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell us about this experience.
Well, working with Celine, I always think about it this way, that Celine and Renee, Celine's husband, who's now no longer with us, I always think of it in the sense that they basically started my career. When I met Celine when I was 11 years old, I told them, what I want to do in the future. I want to make films and documentaries and things like that. And fast forward a couple of years to when I was, I think, 16. I'd been invited by Celine as a Christmas present to go and visit them in Las Vegas. And yeah, I told Renee that I wanted to make documentaries. And he said, okay, well, make a documentary about your time here with Celine. So I did. It was very well received. I mean, I don't think I was 16 yet. I think I was 15. And, for someone at that age to make a documentary like that, I'm very proud of that. And from that, I was able to invite it back to Vegas to go and present the film to Celine, tell her about the film. And that was a very, big part of my career. I'm still in touch with all of them, with Celine's family. And they are a very big part of me. And I thank them very much for starting my career, giving me that boost so people know, okay, well, let's go watch this guy's work.
Thank you. And Dr. Hawass in this moment has some problems because he is in Atlanta.
Yes.
So we can't connect with him. There is a problem for the collegamento. Okay.
It's okay. We will get him. We will get him online sometime and do the
yes, yes. And Curtis, do you like Italy? You live in Italy now?
Ah, sì, mi piace l'Italia tantissimo.
Ah, bene. Che cosa ti piace di più dell'Italia?
Di più? Io piace gente e anche io vivo in un piccolo città. Io piace questo perché tutti, conosci tutti, è una comunità. Sì.
Senti, dall'Egitto, vieni dal Cairo? You come from Cairo in Egypt? Or?
Sorry?
Sei del Cairo? You come from Cairo or another city in Egypt?
Oh, I come from South Africa.
Ah, okay.
There has been a little mistake recently. I noticed this last week. Some of the Italian newspapers were writing about the Cefalù Film Festival in Sicily, and they were saying that the two documentaries were by Egyptian filmmaker Curtis Ryan Woodside. I would love to say that I'm Egyptian, but yeah, I'm from South Africa. Still Africa, but
South Africa. Okay. And Sophia, your partner in this documentary, tell us about her.
Well, Sophia is an amazing Egyptologist. She's also a biomedical Egyptologist. She knows so much about mummification techniques, about examining mummies, about DNA. She's just such a great person to collaborate with. And Sophia's heritage allows her to become entangled with so many different cultures. There's the Persian side. She has a connection to Egypt. She's married to an Italian. So it's really great working with her, and we think a lot on the same level, and we have conversations, and we talk about history, and we're on the phone for like 5 hours. We've done documentaries together before. This was the first one that we really collaborated completely, very closely on. And there will be more documentaries with myself and Sophia as is. We are going to Egypt in September, and we have some things planned that we will be filming. We'd actually been planning to do that before this Cleopatra documentary. So yeah, will be fun.
So Dr. Hawass has this problem. So I think that we can see in Cefalù
Yes.
for your documentary, and all the Italians and all the followers in Italy can came in Cefalù.
Exactly.
In September. We waiting for the date. There is a date or no?
It will be, I think it's the first week of September. I did get an email from them last week. They are in the final stages of selecting the winning films. So exciting.
Yes, very exciting. So Curtis, see you later, and hello, and I think our followers appreciate this direction.
It was so fun talking to you. Thank you, Chiara.
Thank you very much. I am honored and very excited for this.
Yes, me too. Thank you. And yes, we will get Zahi on. Yeah, I had some issues trying to connect. It wouldn't let me in. So, you know, if he is by himself, if he doesn't have an assistant to help him, I think, yeah, there's the possibility for someone of his age to have the difficulty to get online, you know?
Ok.
Yeah.
Allora, saluto tutti i nostri followers e vi aspettiamo al prossimo appuntamento. Scusate perché il dottor Zahi Hawass ha avuto dei problemi di collegamento da Atlanta, ma lo recupereremo perché tanto abbiamo insomma tutti i suoi recapiti ormai. Ciao Curtis.
Ciao, ci vediamo. Grazie Chiara.
Ciao a tutti. Ciao a tutti.
Ciao, ciao.